Cora Bloom wiped her hands on her faded apron as the lunch rush slowed at the diner. She glanced at the small pile of bills tucked into her wallet, every spare cent saved for one reason that had kept her going these past months: a Pilates trial class at that elegant studio downtown. It was a place she passed every day on her bus ride home, its sleek glass walls revealing slim figures bending and stretching with ease. Today, she'd walk through those doors. She changed into her thrift shop blouse and simple trousers, and after her shift, she rubbed her palms together nervously. The canvas tote slung over her shoulder was worn and soft at the edges, far from the designer bags lining the studio entrance, but inside it held her hopes for something new: health, strength, a fresh start. Arriving, Cora hesitated for a moment outside the studio's polished glass doors, taking in the gleaming wood floors and spotless mirrors inside. She stepped up to the sleek front desk where a woman in pristine workout gear and a crisp name tag looked up, her expression flickering between curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. "Hello," Cora began, her voice soft. "I booked a Pilates class. I'm here for the Pilates?" A sharp smile cracked the attendant's lips. "You mean Pilates? Are you sure you're in the right place?" She glanced at Cora's simple outfit and bag, her tone dipping into sarcasm. "This isn't a community center, you know. You might find this a bit above your..." "Please, I just want to participate," Cora interrupted gently, but the woman cut her off with a loud chuckle. The room of patrons near the front desk had gone quiet, all eyes on Cora. "Look, this studio is for serious clients. Maybe you should reconsider wasting our time, and your money." The words hit like a sharp sting. Cora felt herself shrink, small and exposed in the glare of strangers' stares. She swallowed hard, her dreams suddenly bleeding away in a humbling silence. The whispering began before Cora even turned to leave. A few of the studio's patrons exchanged glances, some offering thin, mocking smiles while others leaned toward each other to share quiet, amused remarks about the waitress in thrift clothes trying to take a Pilates class. One woman near the back raised her eyebrows as if to say, "Is this really happening?" Another man smirked openly, nudging his companion with a subtle nod in Cora's direction. But not everyone joined in. A young woman near the front lowered her gaze quickly, uncomfortable and uncertain where to look. An older gentleman shuffled in his seat, his face tightening with sympathy though he said nothing. The room, once a place of calm and discipline, simmered with judgment and tension, turning on Cora like a sudden storm. Heart pounding, Cora breathlessly excused herself, a studio manager stepping forward with a polite but firm voice, "Miss Bloom, perhaps another time." He walked her toward the door, his expression apologetic but matter-of-fact, as if to smooth over the embarrassment without addressing the humiliation that had just unfolded. Cora whispered a soft, "Thank you," barely able to meet anyone's eyes. Outside, the city's hum wrapped around her like a heavy quilt. She moved to a nearby bench under the shadow of an aging oak, the contrast between the studio's polished elegance and the cracked pavement at her feet piercing in its sharpness. Her hands trembled as she clutched the faded canvas tote bag, the one thing that held her aspirations close. The cool evening air seemed to deepen her solitude. For a long moment, she sat unmoving, the hurt twisting in her chest. Then, memory began to wash over her, not in long, heavy thought, but as vivid flashes of a life marked by quiet, steady determination. She saw herself, younger and stronger, wiping down tables, balancing trays stacked with plates and coffee cups, each shift long and exhausting. She remembered the aches that followed every night on her feet, the small sacrifices she made, passing by bakery windows without entering, skipping lunches to pinch pennies for the future. The dinners she ate alone, quickly, while dreaming of a body strong enough to dance or simply stand without pain. Her doctor's voice floated back, patient and concerned, advising gentle exercise to ease her chronic back pain. Pilates was recommended as a low-impact way to build strength. It was a name she clipped from a glossy brochure left in the clinic's waiting room. One day, she'd whispered beneath her breath, smiling faintly. And then the days folded into each other until the money was enough for this one moment, a trial class meant to be a small celebration of endurance and hope. She had booked it weeks ago after careful budgeting, counting every cent. She had imagined entering that studio, her mind filled with dreams of something better. But here she was, sitting on a cold bench, the dream crushed beneath the cold gaze of strangers who saw only her thrift blouse and canvas bag. The sting of the front desk clerk's words echoed sharply, "Wasting our time and your money." The humiliation now a tangible weight pressing her down. Tears threatened, but Cora blinked them away. She wanted to scream, to ask why a place meant to strengthen bodies could be so cruel to a vulnerable soul. Instead, she inhaled deeply, letting the evening air fill her lungs and steady her trembling. A few passerby glanced briefly but kept walking, wrapped in their own concerns. A mother pushing a stroller gave a small sympathetic nod, acknowledging the invisible wounds that some wounds leave. A teenager on a bike stopped to glance at her, eyes wide with a dawning understanding of something she could not yet name. Cora's thoughts shifted away from the sting to the quiet power and endurance. This wasn't the first time she'd been misunderstood or overlooked. Years of serving strangers, patient smiles, and silent strength had built a resilience beneath the surface. She wasn't just a waitress or a woman in thrift clothes, she carried a quiet defiance, a resistance that no single moment of cruelty could erase. After a while, she rose from the bench with slow determination. Her body ached in ways both old and new, but inside a flicker remained, a small, stubborn flame refusing to be snuffed out. She folded her arms around the tote bag and began the walk back through the city streets, the evening light dimming into twilight. Even as she moved away from the studio's glare, the memory of its polished floors, the echoed laughter, and cold rejection would linger. But so too would the quiet moments of courage buried beneath her hurt. She was more than the sum of their judgment. The night wrapped around her softly as she walked, each step a reminder that while today had not been the day she became part of that world, the desire for something better was still fiercely alive. Today's pain was sharp, but in the background, a new resilience was quietly taking root. And somehow, that mattered more. As Cora adjusted the strap of her worn canvas tote bag and began to leave the block where the sleek Pilates studio stood, her mind still thrumming with the sting of rejection, something caught her eye. It was a side entrance she had not noticed in her earlier nervous glance, a plain door set slightly apart from the main glass front, marked "Emergency Exit" in bold red letters. She paused, the faint glow of light spilling unevenly from a crack near the bottom revealing an oddly rusty hinge and a large, heavy padlock securing the door shut. It struck her immediately as strange. Emergency exits were supposed to be accessible, unlocked, safe pathways in case of fire or other dangers. The thought unsettled her deeply. Was this place not as flawless as its gleaming interior might suggest? Was there more beneath the spotless surface, more carelessness, or worse, than the public faced? Curiosity, and a sudden sense of responsibility, nudged her forward. She approached the door cautiously, careful not to draw attention but wanting to see more. Through the narrow gap between the door and frame, she could just make out the studio's polished interior hallway, empty now after closing, but the locked door was a clear barrier. Suddenly, a voice broke across the parking lot from a shadow near the rear entrance of the building. A young woman in studio uniform stood next to a janitor, whispering in hurried, unhappy tones. "I still don't think it's right," the staff member said, glancing nervously toward the front of the building. "You heard what the inspection said," the janitor replied gruffly. "They never certified the fire doors properly. Management's too slow to fix anything, and they worry it'll shut the place down if anyone knows." Cora's stomach churned. It was worse than she imagined, a fire exit padlocked shut, violating safety rules, putting every single client and employee at risk. The weight of the quiet hazard settled on her shoulders. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out her phone from the tote bag. With careful fingers, she snapped photos of the padlocked door, the emergency exit sign hanging just above it. Textured metal, chipped paint, the glaring lock. She hesitated, then opened her email app, composing a message to the local fire department and the Consumer Protection Agency with the subject line, "Urgent fire safety concern at Pilates studio." She described what she had seen and heard from staff, attaching the photos as evidence. She wrote plainly, without embellishment, hoping that someone would take this seriously. Finishing the email, she pressed send and slipped the phone back into her bag. A sudden nervous energy rushed through her, shifting her mood from defeated to purposeful. Though she knew no one might reply, this was something she could do, a small act of vigilance in response to the humiliation she'd suffered inside. For a few moments, she lingered near the side of the building. The cool evening air brushed past her face as distant sounds of traffic hummed, punctuated by the occasional bark of a dog or the rustle of wind through leaves. Passing pedestrians gave her brief, curious glances, but none stopped to approach. Her gaze fell again on the locked emergency door. It was a silent sentinel to a hidden truth, that even the most exclusive places, shining on the surface, could harbor dangerous cracks beneath. A deep breath steadied her. She thought about the irony. Here she was, a woman in thrifted clothes, once mocked and pushed away, now quietly raising flags about a serious hazard. This wasn't the victory she sought, not yet. But it was a start, something meaningful, a way to turn her pain into a thread of hope. With a new purpose, she began to walk away, phone tucked securely. Her steps echoed more firmly now, moving toward the heart of the city and whatever awaited beyond this night. Halfway down the block, her phone buzzed softly in her bag, an unexpected reply. She pulled it out. A message from the fire department: "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will investigate promptly." No fanfare, no promises that changed the world, just the quiet words of acknowledgement. Cora smiled softly, the first true brightness of the evening. It was enough for now. Enough to remind her that even in places where she'd felt invisible, her voice had power. The road ahead would still be long and uncertain, but this small act was hers, something real, grounded in courage. She slipped her phone back into her tote and headed home, the city's lights guiding her with a subtle promise of new beginnings. Within days of Cora's email to the fire department, a quiet ripple began to spread beyond the dim side street where she had made her careful report. The fire safety inspectors arrived promptly at the Pilates studio, their presence unmistakable as they prowled the premises with clipboards and measuring devices, speaking in low but firm tones with studio management and staff. Word of their visit leaked quickly, first through local news wires and then across social media. A local community reporter named David Kim picked up the story. It was a perfect storm: an exclusive Pilates studio, a shocking safety violation, an emergency exit padlocked shut, and the stirring backstory of a modest waitress whose dreams had been crushed not only by public humiliation but by the neglect of basic safety measures. David's article framed the tale with clarity and empathy, capturing the tension between privilege and exclusion, between appearance and reality. The story shared on the local news website quickly went viral. On Twitter and Facebook, users began commenting with stories of their own experiences at upscale gyms and wellness centers. Many recounted petty humiliations and outright exclusionary attitudes that echoed Cora's encounter. Others praised her quiet courage in refusing to remain silent, calling her a voice for the overlooked and a reminder of dignity in the everyday. Amid the growing public outrage, hashtags like #PilatesForAll and #SafetyFirst began trending regionally. Influencers and activists shared David's article, adding their voices to a chorus demanding accountability, not only for fire safety violations but for the culture of elitism that allowed a woman like Cora to be publicly shamed. The Pilates studio's management team swiftly released a public apology. Their statement acknowledged the oversight in safety protocols and committed to immediate renovations and audits to ensure compliance with all fire and building codes. They added a promise to improve inclusivity training for staff and to review our customer service policies to better serve all clients. The front desk employee who had humiliated Cora faced consequences as well. Studio management announced that she was suspended pending an internal review. Rumors swirled among local wellness circles that the employee's attitude and behavior had been a known issue but that it had not been effectively addressed before. With the fire department's findings made public, inspectors confirmed that the padlocked emergency exit posed a serious hazard. The studio faced steep fines and was temporarily ordered to close the facility until repairs and safety upgrades were completed. The closure shut down expensive memberships, disrupting the elite clientele's routines and hammering the studio's reputation. Meanwhile, Cora received an outpouring of support from her own community. Social media comments from coworkers, neighbors, and strangers cheered her bravery. Some followed her story with keen interest and offered words of affirmation. "You stood strong, keep shining, you made a difference." New voices emerged too. Other working-class patrons and hopeful clients of similar studios stepped forward to share stories of exclusion, discrimination, and dismissive treatment. Cora's experience opened space for a broader conversation about barriers in health and wellness industries, about how cultural assumptions and appearances often dictate who deserves access to care and respect. The movement that quietly began with her email grew larger than anyone expected. Community groups organized online forums and in-person meetings, advocating for safer, more inclusive wellness environments across the city. Local politicians took notice, discussing potential policy changes to regulate safety and accessibility standards in private fitness centers. Though Cora never sought the spotlight, her solitary act of reporting a locked fire exit had touched a nerve. What once seemed like a private humiliation had turned into a public reckoning. One afternoon, as the studio still remained closed for renovation, Cora was invited to a community gathering focused on health equity. Nervous but calm, she shared a brief statement about resilience, dignity, and the importance of standing up, even quietly, when wrongs are seen. Her simple words were met with heartfelt applause, and afterward, she was embraced by many who saw themselves in her story. Though the Pilates studio eventually reopened, it did so under new management with a renewed mission statement emphasizing safety and inclusivity. The company posted signs proudly declaring their commitment and featured staff training programs picturing diverse clients and employees. The front desk employee's suspension became permanent, and management made public statements of regret for the incident. In the wake of the controversy, other upscale studios in the region began reviewing their own policies, eager to avoid similar scandals. The conversation that Cora had inadvertently ignited became a catalyst for slow but meaningful change within an industry often criticized for its exclusivity. Most importantly to Cora, the bruising humiliation she endured was softened by the realization that her voice mattered, that her quiet protest made a difference. She watched as her story gave confidence to others and cracked open doors that had long seemed sealed by status and appearances. Though she never imagined herself as a public figure, Cora Bloom, simple waitress with thrifted clothes and a worn canvas tote, became a symbol of courage quietly demanding fairness and respect. And in doing so, she began to reclaim not just her own dignity, but the dignity of many who shared her struggle to be seen and valued. Weeks had passed since the storm around the Pilates studio had settled. Cora Bloom had returned to her familiar rhythm behind the counter of the diner where she worked, serving steaming plates of eggs and wiping down the worn tables like she had done for years. Her clothes remained simple, a thrifted blouse and plain trousers, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she moved, as if the humiliation she endured had been folded into a deeper sense of self. The diner buzzed with its usual lunchtime chatter, but Cora's smile, warm and steady, seemed to carry an invisible weight of victory. She took pride in the small victories of her daily life, knowing that courage came in many forms, not only in grand gestures but in the quiet choices to keep moving forward. One afternoon, as she arranged cups on the shelf, a small envelope slipped through the diner's mail slot and landed on the counter. Curious, she picked it up, noting the neat, official handwriting on the front. Inside was a letter from the local fire department, a sincere note of thanks for her vigilance and the critical role she played in uncovering the locked emergency exit. Attached was a small certificate recognizing her commitment to community safety, signed by the fire chief. The gesture made a delicate warmth bloom in her chest. Along with the letter came an invitation from a local nonprofit health advocacy group. They wanted her to speak at an upcoming community event focused on accessibility and safety in wellness centers across the city, a chance to share her experience and inspire others. The offer was unexpected and tinged with both honor and nervous excitement. At home that evening, Cora sat quietly with the letter and invitation cradled in her hands. She thought about the long journey, from a simple waitress with a dream to a woman whose quiet voice was now part of a larger chorus calling for change. It wasn't the glamour or applause she sought, but this acknowledgement felt like a gentle validation of what she had endured and what she had sparked. A few days later, a carefully worded letter arrived from the Pilates studio's new management, a formal apology for the treatment she had received. They offered a complimentary membership and personal training sessions as a goodwill gesture. Cora read the letter twice, feeling the sincerity behind the words, but also recognizing that accepting their offer was a choice, not an obligation. After a moment's thought, she folded the letter and tucked it into her tote bag without a decision. For now, she preferred to move forward on her own terms, letting the past remain where it belonged. One afternoon, after her shift, Cora walked past the Pilates studio. The glass windows gleamed with sunlight filtering through freshly painted walls, and a bold sign stood near the entrance, committed to safety, inclusivity, and community. Below it, a new logo displayed a welcoming circle of diverse figures stretching together. She paused and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The changes were visible, not just in paint and policy, but in spirit. That day, she carried with her the knowledge that her actions had left a mark, that a place that once rejected her had been shaped by her courage. Later that evening, Cora sat in her modest kitchen, a cup of tea warm between her hands, the soft hum of the neighborhood around her. She thought about the path she had traveled, the nights spent working double shifts, the humiliation faced in a bright, polished studio, and the quiet decision to send a simple email that had become something far greater. Her phone chimed softly with a message. She glanced down and saw a note from a woman she had met at the community event, someone inspired by Cora's strength, who had begun her own journey to demand respect and fairness in her workplace. For a moment, Cora's lips curled into a genuine, easy laugh, the sound of calm strength cultivated through trials, a laughter that filled the small room with warmth. She wasn't a figure of status or fame. She was simply Cora Bloom, a woman who had dared to dream outside her world and, in doing so, had found a quiet kind of courage strong enough to shape change. And that, she thought, sipping her tea with steady hands, was more than enough.